Hello, welcome everyone to this webinar. Today, Empty the Tanks would like to introduce you to Lincoln O'Barry. So we're going to talk today about the UMAH Lumba Center, which is a global example of dolphin sanctuary around the world. Welcome, Lincoln. I'm going to read your bio so we can start talking about what we're here. También recordarles a todos que si están viendo este video en inglés, pueden utilizar los subtítulos automáticos de YouTube. Aquí arribita están los iconos de CC para poner subtítulos y también en el engranaje pueden configurarlo para traducirlo en español. So we're going to do this webinar in English, but you can translate it with the YouTube configuration. Okay, so we have here Lincoln O'Barry of the Dolphin Project is a global leader in cetacean advocacy. Together with his team, he created the UMAH Lumba Center in Indonesia, the first dolphin rescue, rehabilitation, and reintegration sanctuary. He has documented the brutal capture of cetaceans in Taiji, Japan, raising international awareness. Together with his father, Rico Barry, he achieved the ban of circuses and dolphinariums in Indonesia. His activism has influenced laws restricting captivity in countries such as Mexico, Canada, France, the United Kingdom, and more. Their work unites science, education, and compassion to protect dolphins and whales around the world. So we give you officially the welcome, and the word is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, going back to what you just said, in Indonesia, there's actually not a ban on dolphin captivity. We did ban the traveling dolphin circus. And slowly we are working region by region. Right now, we're heavily working in Bali to get rid of abusive dolphin, swim with programs and things like that. I think when I got to Indonesia, in Bali, there were probably 8 to 10 places where you could pay to swim with dolphins, and now there are only 2 remaining. So there's still lots of work to be done. But we can go to the first slide if you want. So I represent the organization Dolphin Project. We can go to the second slide probably. And we've been working since Earth Day 1970. That's when the foundation began and the work began. And we've been working for more than 50 years to abolish the dolphin captivity industry and also stop the slaughter of dolphins. In many places, those campaigns intersect because in places where we find that they slaughter dolphins, typically they will also export dolphins. So we see places like Taiji or the Solomon Islands where there are dolphin slaughters. We also see people setting up there and exporting dolphins around the world for the captivity industry. But specifically today, we're going to talk about Indonesia and our work here in UMAH Lumba. You can go to the next slide. And a lot of times during this, I might say we created or we did. And when I say we, it's really a collaboration between the Dolphin Project, our local NGO partner, which would be Jakarta Animal Aid Network, and then the federal and local governments. This couldn't be done without a collaboration. And in fact, on our website, we have written a protocol on how to readapt and release captive dolphins back in the wild. And basically the first at the top of the list, rule number 1, is unless you have collaboration on the federal level, these type of projects just will not be possible. You need to have the support of the federal government and have them as a partner. And we are lucky enough in Indonesia to have that collaboration where we work with the Ministry of Forestry and the local national parks in our area, and then BKSD Bali, which is like the forestry department within Bali. And this incredible collaboration was what made this entire facility possible. And basically the forestry department in Indonesia came up with this idea and said they wanted to establish a sanctuary And so Dolphin Project was brought in. Dolphin Project provides 100% of the financial support. And then also we're consultants collaborating with Jakarta Animal Aid Network and then with the forestry departments. And but in the end, the final say of when the dolphins get released, what dolphins are going to be released, where the facility is going to be, that's all up to the government. And the government here has just changed. We've had elections, but when we just released the last 3 dolphins, the Minister for Environment and Forestry, she was actually a veterinarian. And so she had a lot of knowledge with animals and understanding that sanctuaries were really needed. And so I have to give a lot of praise to Indonesia because they really led the worldwide movement to create and establish seaside sanctuaries. We can go to the next slide. So just so people understand where we're talking about, we're in Indonesia, which is Southeast Asia. And so you can see Taiwan and the Philippines, and in white would be Indonesia. And then at the bottom where there's like a little red circle, that's specifically where I am right now, Bali, and that's where the Lumba sanctuary is. And you can see, there's a lot of countries that have captive dolphins in Southeast Asia, although it is winding down. We know, like in Korea, they've started releasing dolphins, and they're trying to abolish dolphin captivity. So we'll go down to the next slide, which will actually be a video. So we're going to play this quick video. And so this was when we got to Indonesia, there was there were many places that had captive dolphins, dolphin shows, swimming hotels with swimming pools where you could swim with captive dolphins. But then they also had one of the last traveling dolphin circuses in the world. And so this was a circus that basically would have a few trucks that would drive dolphins around in the back of them. There were, I think, 2 to 4 dolphins. And there would be different circuses going in different directions. And the circus would arrive in a village. They would dig a hole, fill it full of water, put salt in it, and they would have put a circus tent. And then for about 1 week, very cheap, they'd have dolphin shows. They had a couple dancing bears. They had a couple birds that would ride little bicycles and otters. It was very, very, very abusive. And so campaigning for more than 10 years, we were able to not only shut down the traveling dolphin circus, but when the government decided to finally do away with it, at the last minute, they changed the word dolphin to animal. So no more animal circuses were allowed. And so this is a little clip of some of the circus. You can see the grandstands that were put up temporarily, and the makeshift pool with a plastic liner. And it's interesting. I mean, this show is no different than a show that you see at even what are the most state-of-the-art dolphin facilities, multi-million-dollar facilities. It's the same stupid show that's been going on for more than 50 years of just dolphins doing stupid circus tricks. It's kind of strange that dolphins are the highest evolutionary animal in the world, one of the largest brain size and most complex brains, yet they're the last animal in captivity, basically, that still has to work 5 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Almost every other animal in captivity in a modern zoo they create an atmosphere where the lion seems like he's in Africa, or the elephant, they make an area that looks like it, and there's rocks, and the animals can hide behind them if they want to get away from the public. The dolphins are still basically circus animals performing these stupid tricks every day until they die. There is no retirement. It's very strange that dolphins are pretty much the last animal in captivity that we're now creating sanctuaries for. It's been normalized for every other animal. Snakes, rabbits, elephants, they all have sanctuaries except for dolphins. And so hopefully that is going to change now. And so here you see at the end of the show, they're now running a net across the pool, and they're catching the dolphins, and they will load them into a truck, and they'll drive to the next city. And so this, luckily, this is all ended. This traveling circus, this form of abuse is no longer happening. You can see them loading into the truck. And so, yeah, dolphins were shipped all over, driving in little mountain towns. And the most, you know, we would follow the circus all over the place, and it would just be in the most strangest villages that you'd never think you'd see a dolphin up in the mountains on top of a volcano in a little village. But there you go. We can go to the next slide. So not only were there dolphin circuses, then you just had your normal, like, pools where tourists would come. And here's one, you know, right next to the ocean, where the dolphins could literally pop their heads out of these swimming pools and see the ocean right there. Luckily, that facility has been shut down. Just pause it right there. I don't think that was the next slide anyhow. Yeah. You can go to the next slide. Sorry. So part of what we did was a multi-pronged education campaign. So the top left slide, like this is at the airport, and the top right slide, we had giant billboards greeting all the tourists that arrived, basically saying, "Welcome to Bali. Please don't swim with captive dolphins." We had huge billboards on freeways at the bottom left. The bottom right is a screen that when you got off the airplane and you were getting your luggage, you know, you just got off this 20-hour flight and you have to stand for 30 minutes waiting for your luggage. We had rented the screen, and it just was our video looping over and over again, informing the public, please don't swim with captive dolphins, you know, enjoy the beauty. You know, Bali is all about nature and enjoying nature. And so we wanted people to go explore the ocean and enjoy and explore nature, and not be lazy and go swim with captive dolphins. And so it was about 10 years of campaigning and education to get to the place where we are now, where we're actually seeing a sanctuary and releasing dolphins. You can go to the next slide. This was also part of our campaign. This was a group of kids that rode Vespa scooters, and they drove all over Indonesia, and every city they would stop in, they would do these big photos of like them gathering together in the shape of a dolphin. You know, we tried many different kind of outside the box ways to inform the public. You can go to the next one and play that video. The video that played at the airport. Yeah. You can go to the next slide. We visited a lot of schools. We did puppet shows. The one kid here dressed like a superhero. He was kind of a character in this comic book that we created in this little booklet called Dolphin Warrior. And we trying to get all the kids to become dolphin warriors. You can go to the next slide. This was probably one of our most successful campaigns, was providing free paint for street art. There's a lot of street art and graffiti in Bali. And so, you know, we would spend a lot of money sometimes renting one billboard, but we found it a lot more cost effective to do street art, because some of these murals were done 10 years ago and they're still up. And there's probably more than 100 murals all over Bali. And it's kind of like a repetitive, like an advertising repetition, that everywhere you go, you see these giant dolphin murals with the hashtag Free Bali Dolphins. And it's just kind of like this subliminal messaging that like you see over and over and over again. And we put them in very touristic areas. And because they're beautiful, other people do not paint over them. And so it was a very cost-effective way to get the message out. And they're beautiful. You can go to the next one. These are just some more examples of some of the graffiti and the street art that we did. You can go to the next one. So the first thing we created was actually, it was called Camp Lumba Lumba. And this was created in about 2011, I believe, is when we started. And what we found is almost all of the dolphins in captivity in Indonesia were all captured in one national park area called Karimun Jawa. And what was happening a lot of times is, to bypass the permit process to get dolphins, aquariums were contracting with a fisherman to catch them dolphins. And so the fishermen would go catch the dolphins, and then they would call the Department of Forestry and say, we were out fishing and we accidentally caught 2 dolphins in our fishing net. Can you please call the aquarium to come rescue them? So then the aquarium would come rescue the dolphins and take them and never return them to the sea. And so they were bypassing the permit process. So when we first hooked up with Jakarta Animal Aid Network, Jakarta Animal Aid Network signed a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, with the government to provide support and work on this dolphin issue. So we built the very first, you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide if you want. Yeah. It should be, yeah. So this is Camp Lumba Lumba. So what we did is we built this very first sea pen, and this is right in the area where all the dolphins were captured. And so now, based on the MOU that was signed, if any dolphins were accidentally caught by fishermen, instead of them calling the aquarium to come rescue them, they would be brought here and then released back into the wild. And since we built this facility, there has never been a capture of dolphins again in Indonesia. Just by building this sea pen, it stopped 100% of the captures, and there have been no more captures. And ideally, a lot of the dolphins that would be released would actually go to this facility. This is not so much a sanctuary or a retirement center. This is more of a quick release center, where it's a smaller pool. It's only maybe at the deepest part, 3.5 meters deep. And it's meant for, here, pause that right there. Pause. Or go back one slide. I don't want to do this slide yet. Yeah. So this is what's called a quick release center. So dolphins would come here that had just been captured, or potentially dolphins that we've had at Camp Lumba Lumba, when they're ready to be released, would be brought here for just a month or two and then released back into the wild. And this is their home range. Most of the dolphins in the area around this sea pen are what's called resident dolphins. And within bottlenose dolphins, which are one species, you have transient dolphins, which, like you see in Japan, which are traveling thousands of miles, constantly moving. Then you have resident dolphins that live in one area and you see them all the time. Like in Karimun Jawa, we've identified the same dolphins that we see year round that just live in that area. And so potentially most dolphins in captivity in Indonesia, their families still live in this area, that if we release them, they might reconnect with their original pod and their original families. And that's always the most ideal situation when you're releasing dolphins, is to try to release them where they were captured, in the hope that they can return back to their pod. So you can go to the next slide. So after Camp Lumba, we then built UMAH Lumba, which means house of the dolphin. In Indonesian, Lumba means dolphin. So Lumba Lumba would mean many dolphin. And then UMAH means house, and Lumba dolphin. So this would be house of the dolphin. And so this is UMAH Lumba. This is a rehabilitation, a release center, but also potentially retirement center. And when you're looking at this, you're really only seeing about 10% of the facility. because 90% of it is under the water. This is some of the deepest sea pens in the world. The biggest square you see there at the bottom left, that is about a little more than 20 meters deep. So very, very deep. All of the different pens are connected by gates. So for instance, if we were to get male dolphins and female dolphins, they could be separated into two different areas so that there's no mating going on, because you don't want to perpetuate and have dolphins get pregnant that cannot be released, and then you're perpetuating captivity for another 30 or 40 years. In the last release we just did, we had all males, so we were able to open all the gates and the dolphins could swim and have the entire area. And if you see the one pen that would be on the left bottom side there, that pen is unique, and we're going to have another video later on that we can see closer of that pen, but that's what we call the foraging pen. And so the dolphins would spend their time in the three bigger pens. They could swim between all of them, but then for 1 hour a day, we would open the foraging pen, which is on the bottom left, and the dolphins would swim in there, and that pen has much finer netting. You know, the other sea pens, the netting is maybe this size, but in the foraging pen, it's maybe this size. And so at night, we would have fishermen catching live fish, netting them, and dumping them into the foraging pen. And so it's filled with little fish that they love to eat. And so we would bring them into that foraging pen, and the dolphins will actually feed themselves. And in the foraging pen is where they learn how to use their sonar and how to work together to catch fish and how to corner them into one area and cooperatively fish. And it's very important for the release process. But even dolphins that you are retiring that are going to spend their lives there, it provides them with enrichment and something to do and activity, because, you know, even though it's a sanctuary, it can be very boring, just like being in a pool at a hotel or any captive environment. Captivity is inherently very boring, and so you need to provide them some enrichment. We can go to the next slide. So you saw the sea pen that we built. That was one situation. This is another. This is a mock-up of something that we want to do in Europe. And Europe, where we want to do this, has these beautiful fjords. And so the most ideal situation is you have a body of water like this. I believe on the top left, or the left picture, you can see there's a net run across the mouth of that fjord. And so the entire bay is actually the sanctuary. The floating sea pen would be the platform where you have the medical pens, where you do the feeding, the observation, but the dolphins actually have the entire area. And for like a retirement center, that would be the best case scenario. The bigger, the better. You still want to have a small area like these floating sea pens, and it doesn't have to be floating in the middle. You could have a dock coming from the beach and then have a medical pen there. There's many configurations, and everywhere we've done this work, you know, we've done releases of dolphins in Brazil, Guatemala, Nicaragua, South Korea, Georgia, Indonesia. Every facility we've built has been different. And ideally, though, if you can find a natural body of water like this, that you can be allowed to run a net across it, that's the best case scenario, especially for long-term keeping dolphins. I mean, at UMAH Lumba, we could keep dolphins long-term, but ideally, if that were to happen, we would look for a more suitable area that had a bigger bay that we could actually net off the bay, and the dolphins have the entire bay to enjoy. We can go to the next slide.
Ok, antes de ponerle play a los videos, vamos a recordarles a todos que pueden traducir esta presentación con los subtítulos automáticos de YouTube en el icono de CC y en el icono de engrane.
So play the
Gracias,
video on the
Lincoln.
left, number 7. So this is one of the dolphins that we released, and this shows him at the hotel, the swimming pool. And this is very typical captive dolphin behavior, where they're just sitting at the surface. This dolphin had been in isolation. He was by himself. They had different swimming pools, and some of the pools only had one dolphin, so the dolphins had no contact with other dolphins. We think he could have been in isolation more than 7 years without ever seeing another dolphin. And you can see the water is very cloudy. It was just full of chlorine. The dolphin's skin was very light in color because they had a roof, so the dolphin was not getting sun. The chlorine was bleaching the skin. It was bleaching their eyes. You can play that video again, and that's very typical behavior you'll see at aquariums where it's called logging, where they just sit at the surface. You know, this is no different than behavior when you would go to a zoo and see an animal just pacing back and forth. They're slowly going crazy. And you can go back to the main slide and play the bottom right picture. You know, here they are. This is the foraging pen. And so here's the dolphins working together to catch live fish. And it becomes, at the beginning, it's more of a game where they're playing with it, they're catching it, they're releasing it. But at the end, I believe you'll see the dolphin flip the fish around and actually eat it. There we go. And you can actually hear them using the sonar again. You know, in these captive cement tanks, a lot of times dolphins stop using their sonar because it just bounces off the walls, and it's kind of like a hall of mirrors. Go back to the main where you can see all 3. And then you can see, like, the top right picture. You know, as soon as you put the dolphins into a natural sea pen in the ocean, the healing really begins instantly, because now they're in the ocean. They can feel the tide going up and down. They can hear the sounds of shrimp and the clicking and the fish, and it's the sun, and it's just the healing begins. You see the color of their bodies start to change, and you see the improvement within the eyes, and their personalities start to come back. It's almost instantaneous. And of course, and so you can go to the next slide. The next slide is the moment that the dolphin was brought to our sanctuary and introduced to other dolphins for the first time in the ocean. So this is the moment he was brought to our sea pen, and he finally gets to see his buddy who hasn't seen in like 7 years. And you'll see him do a little spin for joy here. So you can go to the next slide. The next slide will be a little video about one of the dolphins in particular. So again, just by himself, logging at the surface. And so one thing you really notice is dolphins at many of these facilities, swim with dolphin places, aquariums, marine parks, they spend 90% of their life at the very surface of the water. once we bring them to Lumba, like I said, 90% of the sanctuary is underwater. It's very deep. And so we notice they start to spend 90% of their time deep down at the bottom. The water's cooler. They're not sunburned anymore because they're not just sitting at the surface getting hit by the sun. Their color changes because they're spending more time deep down. They become dolphins again, basically. A lot of the excuses of why dolphins are in captivity is that they're ambassadors. Children need to see these dolphins, and these dolphins are ambassadors. But these dolphins are caricatures. They're not ambassadors. A dolphin in captivity no more represents dolphins in the wild than Mickey Mouse represents mice. A big excuse again is like, people only save what they love, or people need to see these dolphins in order to want to protect them or understand them. But, most young children, 8, 9, 10 years old, love dinosaurs. Most very young children, they can name all the different dinosaurs and the crustacean, the different periods that the dinosaurs lived in. How do these kids know about dinosaurs? They've never seen one before. And so to say you must see something to love it is just not true. Elephants have been in captivity longer than any animal in the world, and yet they're on the verge of extinction. And blue whales, I've worked with dolphins my whole life. I've never seen a blue whale before, and we took that animal that was almost extinct, and now there's a lot more blue whales without anyone ever having to see them. So there's no correlation between seeing a dolphin at SeaWorld or any of these marine parks and people saving them. In fact, I would say it's almost the opposite. You can go to the next slide. So we'll talk about Lumba now. And what I want to talk about, so we know Lumba is very well known for dolphins, but I want to really talk about in this talk about what other things that can happen. Because, like, for instance, at Lumba, we have a full-time veterinary staff that's just dedicated to Lumba. But they're not working 24 hours a day just with the dolphins. They're really on standby in case something goes wrong. Every few weeks, we do take blood and test the blood, but that just takes a few hours, and we have a big staff. When we opened Lumba, the first dolphins, we got them from a hotel. And when the government came and confiscated the dolphins, we immediately hired the entire staff, the security guards, all the people that were former trainers, which we now call dolphin caregivers, the maintenance peak staff. We hired everybody and brought them because they knew the animals and it was important to bring them. So we had this large staff. So one of the first things we created at Lumba, there's the sea pen that you see floating out in the bay. And we really don't let the general public come there because we're letting the dolphins go. And it's about breaking the bond of human and dolphin. So you don't want people around. So very close to the sea pen, we've rented some land and we built the housing for the staff, our laboratories for the blood testing and that kind of stuff. But we built an education center. And this is where when visitors want to come, tourists and school kids and different people want to come visit and learn about what we're doing, they come here. But since we had this structure, we decided to also turn it into a school. And so since 2001, when we started, you can see we've had every year we have about 60 to 90 students that come and actually at the end of the year graduate. And we teach classes like different environmental education, geography, biology, English classes, core English, which has changed the lives of these children because we're in a very remote, small village and jobs are very limited. And if you only speak Bahasa, the local language, you can only work in a small local shop making very minimal wages. But the students that are able to learn English are able to go work at big resorts and other places where they can vastly earn a lot more money. And for a lot of these students, it's changed their life. They've gone on to college. They're just a step above all the other kids because they have this extra education. And so not only are we having a visitor center, but we actually have a school where we have these kids come. And you can go to the next slide. So on the top right, you'll see that's our school kids that are from the local village, and it's free. We don't charge any of the kids for their education. They don't have to buy uniforms, so it's no extra burden on the parents. The bottom right picture, although it's small, that's a visiting school, and that's like a Western school that's here in Bali. And so we got a lot of the schools throughout Indonesia will come and visit for a few days. So not only do we have the 60 to 90 full-time local students, we have college kids from around the world, elementary school kids from all over Indonesia. They come and visit. And on the left is a video, play that video. That's the local village. We actually teach traditional Balinese dancing. So we help preserve their culture. And so that's like 2 or 3 times a week. Almost all Balinese girls learn these traditional dances, and it's part of their local culture. And so we want to, foster that as much as possible. Go down one slide. So since we have these sea pens and we have this big piece of land, and we have the veterinary staff who's not busy with dolphins all the time, we're able to micromanage, and we started a sea turtle hospital in 2022. And that was, a fisherman. It all started because a fisherman brought us a turtle he had found that was injured. And then immediately the government was like, oh, you guys know how to take care of turtles. Like, that's amazing. We need a turtle hospital. So we created this dedicated turtle hospital. This building that you see here actually has an operating theater. We have x-ray machines. We've got a couple pools that we bring them here. Also at the sea pen, we've also got a couple pens that are dedicated to rehabilitation of turtles. And so some of the turtles that we get are brought to us by fishermen that are injured. Others, we work very closely with the police and the Navy and the Coast Guard. They sometimes find fishermen that are illegally smuggling turtles. And so sometimes we'll stop a boat that might have 30 to 50 turtles tied up in it that they're taking between the main island of Java and Bali, one direction or the other, for the meat trade. They're sold to restaurants or local markets or things like that. You can go to the next slide. Oh, so stay on this slide. Sorry, go back. And so you can see the numbers. Like the first year was 3 sea turtles, and when they found out we can do it, the numbers went up. And so you see 2003, 2004, and in 2005 already, we've done so many. It's crazy. But most of these, like the olive ridley, that's a critically endangered turtle. The green sea turtles, those are endangered sea turtles. So these are all very, very important animals to save because they're either critically endangered or vulnerable on the international list. You can go to the next slide. And this is just a little bit, this is the top left. That's just right when the dolphins when we got them from a confiscation working with the police. The top right, we're doing like a medical procedure on one of these turtles. And you can see that they're big turtles. And then the bottom would be release. And we release so far, every turtle we've released back in the wild. Typically, right after a confiscation, we will observe and check out medically every turtle, and within 48 hours, release them, most of them back in the wild. Sometimes a few will have some injuries sustained during their captivity, and so they'll have to spend a few months with us, but then they are released back in the wild. So we have 100% release rate for all sea turtles that are brought to our facility. And this is something that really doesn't cost us that much more money because we already have the staff. We already have the veterinary. We already have the medical clinic for the dolphins. So why not save other animals? It doesn't take that much more effort, and it goes a long way. Back to these other projects like the school. You know, we're Dolphin Project. Why do we have a school? Why are we saving sea turtles? Why are we doing these other things? Because dolphins are important, but people are too, and so are the other animals. And so a lot of the work you do is about winning hearts and minds. It's about getting the support of whatever community is where you're building your sanctuary, because you need that community to be the security guards for your sanctuary. When you let dolphins go back in the wild, you want the cooperation of the fishermen to help you, tell you we saw dolphins here, we saw dolphins there. And so we do a lot of these outreach programs and have this full support. The community where we are really loves us, and like we are part of that community. And so it's very important. You can go to the next slide. And so we'll play the video in a second, but here we also started, once we started rescuing turtles and people knew we were rescuing dolphins, we started rescuing monkeys. People are like, oh, there's a monkey chained up in somebody's yard. You guys save animals. Can you do anything? And it all started with rescuing one monkey. And now we've built this pretty massive facility now where we have, I think, up to 40 to 50 primates we can keep at any given time. And you can see the numbers in 2022, 15 long-tail macaques. That's the primate that is in Bali. They're indigenous to this area, and they are also endangered now. I think almost every monkey we've ever rescued as well, we've released back into the wild. And so the monkeys that we're getting are either kept illegally as pets, or sometimes in very poor areas, you'll pull up to an intersection in your car and there'll be a guy with a monkey on a chain with a head of a doll, and there'll be like a dancing monkey with music trying to beg for money. Sometimes because the cities are expanding into the area where the monkeys live, you'll get monkeys that are living very close to humans and become problematic, where they're coming into the villages and either attacking people or stealing from the stores. And so those monkeys we'll get them, we'll bring them to our facility. I think you can play the video. The video number 12, it should be at the top there. So that's our facility. It started with one small cage and has turned into this massive building. And so you can just leave it freezed on that. That's fine. These are many, many little cages, but they also open up where they can become one cage. And so we'll put like monkeys in different cages side by side until they get used to each other. And then we'll open the gate and they form a troop. And so once we get about 30 to 40 primates together in the cages where it's all open and they're all together, those 40 primates will be released back into the wild together, and they'll stay together forever. They form their own troops and will stay together. And again, it doesn't cost us that much more money because we already have the staff. We had the infrastructure to do this. We spend probably an additional, I think it's something like $3 a day to feed a monkey. So, it's an extra $100 a day when we're totally full. And another thing we've done as well is, because I have all this land, we've started planting a lot of fruit trees. So now we're creating our own food for free to feed the monkeys. And again, all the primates that we get, they're all released back in the wild. You can go to the next slide. You can play video 13. This is in our veterinary clinic. So here we're IDing one of the monkeys that's been sedated, and we're doing a medical check, but right here, they're taking the fingerprints. And this is the same vet that works with the turtles. He works with the dolphins. You can go to the next slide.
Piece of paper.
Yeah.
So she wants one.
Let's go to the next slide. Go back. Video 14. And the bottom would be the monkeys right when they're being released. That's out in the jungle. And you see them stay together. But video 14. Many of the primates we get to are babies. So the babies are immediately adopted by, and now we can go to the next slide, by adult primates. So because we already have the veterinary clinic for the dolphins, we're also able to offer to the entire village and our surrounding area, we have a no-cost veterinary clinic. So we provide sterilization for dogs and cats, emergency surgeries, and it's at no cost. We don't charge for that. And, you know, you can see the numbers. When we started, 69 dogs sterilized, and the next year, 151. We provide free vaccination. And again, it doesn't cost us a lot of money to do this because we already have the vet, we have the nurse, we have the staff that can work with animals. And, you know, it provides a lot of goodwill in the village, and we can save a lot of animals. And it doesn't, again, cost us more additional money than the actual dolphin sanctuary itself. And here you can go to the next slide. So it's not only dogs and cats and monkeys, but then, you know, we become known as the dolphin, you know, the animals, people that can save animals. So now we start to get calls for all kinds of animals. And so in 2001, during the pandemic, we actually rescued 8 elephants that were starving. And we have a quick response team. Our team, if we get a phone call anywhere in Bali that there are animals, they'll race from Lumba Lumba to wherever the animals are. And so we rescued and took care of 8 elephants for 3 months in 2021, 3 sun bears. This hasn't been updated, 2024. Like 2024, we 1,000, almost 100 birds. Those were all rescued and released back in the wild. Almost every animal on this list, except for the elephants and the bears, were released back into the wild. Sometimes we'll rescue animals that are not indigenous to Indonesia. And so those will have to be taken to a forever sanctuary. You can go to the next slide. And you can see, like, there's just a porcupine. The bottom right is our vet assessing the elephants. I'm not sure what the video on the left is, number 15, but you can play that. That's one of the sun bears. So when we rescued these bears, they were starving. They were at a facility with the elephants where it was like people could pay to ride and watch the elephants and watch the bears. But because there was no tourism during the pandemic, this place went bankrupt. And they didn't alert the government that they had run out of money till 6 months after they ran out of money. So when we arrived, the bears and the elephants were starving. So we immediately restaffed the facility and started feeding them and providing the bears with enrichment and getting them back to health. And so these are a lot of things, like if there was a facility in Mexico, these are all little side projects that the facility can provide for the community. And it provides great benefit. It's not just important for the dolphins, but the entire community benefits from these type of sanctuaries. The next slide. This is something else. We wanted to become carbon neutral. And where most corporations, they buy what's called carbon credits, we actually wanted to do it ourselves. So we started in 2020, and our staff actually goes out and we replant mangroves, which provides more trees, which is great for the environment and creating oxygen and cleaning the air. But mangroves are important for protecting the coastline. And so you can see every year we try to plant more every single year than the year before. And I think we've planted just under 40,000 trees now in entire forests. You can go down. And this is something that our staff physically is going and doing. We've actually physically gone and planted 40,000 trees. You can go to the next slide. And you can see us going out there, and it's vast areas. Hectares now are just covered with mangroves. And we go back and check the measurements and see how the trees are doing. And it also offsets any of the travel that our team does. It makes our organization, we're carbon neutral. We're not, sometimes this work requires us to fly different places or drive trucks, and we're offsetting that by planting these trees, which also benefits the local community. You can go to the next slide. This is another project that we started at UMAH Lumba. This is called a canine anti-poaching unit. You can go to the next slide. And so what we've done is we've trained these dogs, Belgian Malaways, and these dogs are trained to detect wildlife. So different species of primates, turtles, pangolins, many different animals. And so we use the dogs either at the port. So there are a lot of these ferries that trucks can drive onto the ferry and go between Bali and Java, the nearest island. And it's a big smuggling route for animal smuggling. We also are right next to a national park where there's a lot of illegal hunting. So the dogs are also trained to detect gunpowder and traps. And so the dogs are brought into the national park and they find illegal trapping or people that are illegally poaching at the ports. The dogs are used to sniff the cars going onto the ferries, and people are hiding animals under their seat or in the trunks. And it's wildly successful. I mean, we found one car last year that had almost, I want to say 1,400 animals just in one car alone. You can go to video 16. I think this is one of the dogs. This is in the training session for one of the dogs. Yeah, this is one of our canines, and this is our training area. And the dog, when he smells something, he will sit down to alert the trainer that he's smelled an animal or he has smelled gunpowder.
Goodbye.
So he's sitting and he's alerting, so we know there's an animal hidden in there or something. Right now, what we're using is these little plastic cones, and we have different scents of different animals that we put inside the cone, and then the dogs are trained for those animals or for gunpowder. And I believe there are only 3 teams of canines in the world that do this kind of work. So we're very proud of that project. You can go to the next slide. Oh, I think that's it for the slide. So, yeah. So anyway, these are all different things that a sanctuary can do. It just doesn't have to be dolphins. Dolphins are the start, and dolphins are obviously we're the Dolphin Project. It's our focus, but it becomes all these other things that benefit the community, that benefit the entire island of Bali that we're on. And it's important. And, one of the most important things, we've been doing these sanctuaries for more than 40 years now. For Dolphin Project, it's our normal work. Generally with the public, sanctuaries for dolphins are a new thing. And so we're trying to normalize that. And it's important that the work you do in Mexico or anyone that, we want to take what we did in Bali and replicate this model in Europe, in Mexico, in North America, South America. But it's done very transparently and cost effectively. It shouldn't cost many, many millions of dollars and exorbitant salaries. There's many sanctuary projects that are trying to get started all over the world right now. Some have been trying for 7-8 years. They've been raising money and they have nothing to show for it. And, you know, I'm not going to say who it is, but one of the sanctuary projects, you know, they're paying their directors and their top staff huge sums of money. And in fact, one of the projects, I'm not going to say which one, but 2 of their top staff members, they've paid them more in 7 years, and they have not built a sanctuary yet than we have spent on our entire project in 7 years. In 7 years, we have educated and created a school with 60 to 90 kids a year. We've released hundreds of primates back in the wild, hundreds of endangered sea turtles and critically endangered sea turtles, canine units, built a dolphin sanctuary, released dolphins, and all of that was done for less money than 2 people were paid just in salary for promoting. And so you got to be very careful to do it cost effectively and transparently for your followers to see where is the money going, how is it being spent. It's very important for the future of sanctuaries, because when you just collect money and you don't have anything to show for it, it hurts the movement to move sanctuaries forward. You need these successes to keep the public engaged, and it's important. And it's all these little projects are important as well. You know, I don't know if you have primates in Mexico or what other side projects, but it's important to see what the needs are of your local community and see if there's a way for the sanctuary to help support some of those needs in that community.
I think maybe the way in Mexico is that some of the companies that have dolphinariums, they already have they already have sanctuaries, which, you know, they brag of releasing back monkeys and birds to the wild and helping turtles. So the question for them will be, why not also the dolphins now, if they are all doing already all the work aside? And right now, I think it's the right moment for questions and answers. We're gonna invite into the webinar to Brittany Arlene, so she can help us with the questions. Welcome, Brittany. We can hear you. You can put your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation, and it's been extremely informative. And yeah, we have some questions coming from Marielle about sanctuaries in Mexico and North America. So first, generally, what lessons from Bali do you think could be adopted to a sanctuary in Mexico or Latin America? And you see things that could be similar or things that we maybe need to do differently?
Well, the thing that would be very different is, you know, our facility is rehabilitation, rescue, rehabilitation, and release. You know, I think in Mexico, the focus will be rescue and rehabilitation. You have to assume, you know, you don't know about a dolphin until you bring it to a sanctuary and you can assess it, whether it's a candidate for release. So you have to assume that any dolphin that you bring, you may potentially have to take care of that animal for the rest of its life. You know, in Bali, when we do a release, we call it a soft release, because really what we're doing is we're opening the gate when we've assessed that the dolphins are all candidates, that we see the body language, they're not interested in humans anymore, they're catching live fish. We open the gate and we really give them the choice whether they want to go out into the ocean, or maybe they want to just live in that area and still come back for food, or maybe they don't want to leave the comfort of the sea pen because they have gone a little crazy and they won't make it in the wild, and they realize that. You know, dolphins are a lot like people. There's humans that go to prison for 40 years and they come out of prison after 40 years like nothing happened. And there's some people that go to jail and after 3 years they lose their mind and they can't reintegrate into society. And dolphins are like that. It's a case-by-case basis. Although we've created a protocol on how to do this work, it's still a case-by-case basis. And so you don't know about any dolphin until you spend some time, a month or 2, with the dolphin to understand, is this potentially a candidate for release or not? So getting the animals, you assume we may have them forever. And so you want to make, ideally, if you can find a bay, a big area of water where you can net it off and they have this large lagoon area, and that's the most ideal. And then, obviously, again, rule number one is government cooperation. So you want the government to be a partner from the very beginning, because they can cut through a lot of the red tape. You don't have to go buy land. The government owns most of the land of your country. And so if they can provide you an area for free where you can do this work, that saves a lot of money as opposed to having to buy land.
Mm.
So government cooperation is probably the most important thing. And then it's also engaging with the local, we've done this work all over the world. And one thing we found is that, this in Indonesia, we're just supplying the financial support, and, they've never done this work. So we're consulting, but this is really an Indonesian project. The entire staff is Indonesian. Just like Mexico, this should be a Mexican project. This is not like the Americans coming telling you what to do. It's really, we're just here to support you, but this is a Mexican project. This is a Mexican problem, and it's like a Mexican solution. And so that's important as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was her follow-up question, was the criteria determining if a dolphin can be released or if it needs to remain under human care. So it sounds like, is that something that you guys have developed a protocol for, and then you're assessing on a case-by-case basis with each dolphin that comes into care?
Yes, and the protocol, we have it on our website. It's available for download for free. It's no secret. We don't try to hide this work. We don't want to have the monopoly on dolphin sanctuaries. We'd like to see other people doing this work, and we've been doing it ourselves for more than 40 years. So the protocol is something we've learned from working in many countries and doing this work. Every readaptation and release we've ever done, it's evolving. Even though we've done a readaptation release of more than 25 dolphins, really this work is still in its infancy, and it's still a learning curve. It's like, for instance, like a dolphin born in a concrete tank has never been released. And there's many scientists and experts that will say it can't be done. But that's not how you do science. Science is, you must do it or you fail, and you do it a few times, and then you get the data, and I can't say if it's possible or not. I would think personally it probably is possible. You're talking about an animal that has been with one of the largest evolved brains for more than 30 million years, that those things about the wild are ingrained in its DNA. Mm-hmm. I think if a dolphin born in a cement tank was paired with dolphins that were born in the wild, that the wild-born dolphins could teach the captive-born dolphin behaviors about how to catch live fish and the techniques. I think all of that is possible, but until you do it, you don't know. And so it's all trial and error. We're still figuring this out, this whole releasing dolphins. Obviously, if you can teach a dolphin to jump through a fire hoop, you can teach it to catch live fish again. That's ingrained in its DNA.
Absolutely.
So,
it sounds like when you were describing in Indonesia that the dolphins that were being rehabilitated in that sea pen are from that, I think you said they're from that local area. So is that always the case, that when you're rehabilitating them or releasing them, it's from the area where those dolphins were captured? And so like in this case with Mexico, if we're looking at a sanctuary in the Gulf of Mexico, is it essential that only dolphins from that area come there and they need to be in different locations?
No. And the dolphins we released in Bali were not from Bali. They were from Karimunjawa. But in the end, our recommendation was that the dolphins be moved when they were ready to be released to Karimunjawa. But as consultants, all we can do is make a recommendation. In the end, it's the government. And the government here in this case decided, no, we want to release them in Bali. We recommended Karimunjawa, but they decided Bali. And we did tag the dolphins. And we observed one of the dolphins swimming more than 1,500 miles. So it is possible for them to get back to that area, but it would be for us, it's always the best case scenario to do this, but in the area where they were captured when you're going to release. But you can also have multiple facilities like we do. So you could build a sanctuary in the most appropriate area for you guys to build a sanctuary. But then if you determine the dolphins are releasable, a second temporary facility could be built where the dolphins were captured, and they could be released there. But your actual retirement center could be anywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lincoln.
Like we're saying in Europe, there's a need in Europe to build sanctuaries. And so almost, the sanctuaries in Europe are all going to be retirement centers because those dolphins in Europe are all from the Caribbean, or they were born in the captivity, and they could never be released in Europe. But if we were to build a sanctuary in Europe and determine, hey, these two dolphins they were born in the wild and they might be candidates for release, then you can find out, oh, they were captured off of Mexico, or they were captured off Florida, and build a temporary sea pen for 2 months, move them there, prepare them, and release them back in the wild, and then remove that facility. But the retirement center should be in somewhere that's clean water, somewhere far from humans, somewhere where you have land long term, and that it's not important the dolphins were from there.
Okay, and for last question, we were asked, what do you think is the most sustainable model for funding the sanctuary?
Funding is something that you have to think about, because you have to consider that, if you get a dolphin that's 7 or 8 years old and it's not a candidate for release, you might have that dolphin in your care for 30 to 40 years. I mean, there are captive dolphins that are 47 years old. So it's not crazy to think that you could have them that long. And so, when you first build your facility, you're going to have a rush of excitement and rush of donors that are going to be helping you. As time goes on, that gets harder because people become interested in other problems and want to support other things. And so long-term funding is something that's very, very important. And so, when you have a center that is a release center, so like for our monkeys or the dolphins that we're going to release, we don't allow the public there because you're trying to break the barrier of man and dolphin and human and dolphin. You're trying to break that contact. But when you have a facility where the dolphins are retired and they're going to spend the next 30 years at the facility, there is a way to have the public not at the sea pen. Like with our facility, we are a release center, so the dolphin people cannot come out to the sea pen. We don't let anyone out there except for our staff. But we had a viewing area that was about 100 meters away on a cliff where the public could go and look down on the sanctuary and see it. We built this education center where you can have TV screens that have cameras at the sea pen where they can see live what's happening. So it's a combination of, you're going to want to have some education center where people can come and you collect donations there and you can give a talk. Schools will want to come visit, and there's a way to monetize that and charge a small fee for some schools to come visit. Also, veterinary students to graduate. If you're becoming a veterinarian, you have to get a few weeks worth of field work. You have to go work somewhere in the world and to graduate. And so there's a way to monetize that and charge the students who are coming. You can have an adopt a dolphin program. No one of these programs will fund your whole thing. It's doing all these different programs together. But it'll always be tough. It's always a struggle because, especially because we have all these other programs with the monkeys, it just gets more expensive. But yeah, it's a combination of doing many different little things. And then you're going to have different corporations. People will donate solar panels. Dive companies will donate the dive gear. There's different corporate partners. we started working with hotels in our area that now are offering, they're telling every guest, you know, for every night you stay in our hotel, we're donating like $2 to the sanctuary, and a tree is being donated in your honor. And so it's all these kind of collaborations that we're doing together that help fund the project.
That's great to hear. Brittany, thank you very much for joining us. And Lincoln, we are like so grateful that you joined the conversation and accept the invite of Empty the Tanks Mexico to share all this information and participate on this webinar. We admire your work so much. You set the example like worldwide, and we hope we can brag ourselves of our first sanctuary for dolphins here in Mexico soon, and we will keep working together. Thank you very much.
I think Mexico has a real chance of being the first sanctuary for dolphins in the Americas. I think that is very possible. And that would be, you know, basically the third. I think Europe will be the next place to create a dolphin sanctuary. I think that'll happen very soon. But I would think Mexico would probably be the third in line to have a sanctuary, and they would be the first project to complete in the Americas, which would be, it would create worldwide news all over. You know, there's a lot of interest in dolphins and sanctuaries, and it would bring a lot of positive publicity to your country doing this, and a sense of pride. And I think it's very possible.
Yes, we're working towards it. And as you say, it will be a work in collaboration with federal government and many associations and people that give its heart and will be involved till the end and all the years to come.
Yes. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
See, we're like here. If you want to say any last words, we can now give the end.
No, we'll leave it at that. I just think that Mexico really has the chance of doing something with the new legislation. Mexico is now heading in the right direction. Obviously, Mexico has some, you know, one of the largest groupings of captive dolphins and captive dolphin facilities. You know, we're seeing the collapse of the dolphin company with the new legislation. We're seeing the collapse of the dolphin abusement industry in Mexico. And so there's going to be a huge need in Mexico, almost more than anywhere, to create sanctuaries. I know you guys have been talking about actively creating one, and I think there's going to be a need for a lot more. Hopefully whatever you guys create will be the model that others can copy, and that we see them pop up all over Mexico, because there's going to be a huge need for the next 5 to 10 years. So anything we can do on our end to help you guys, we're there to help you, because we want to see it happen.
That's right. Thank you very much. Bueno, pues muchas gracias a todos los que se conectaron. Aquí tuvimos a Lincoln O'Barry contándonos todo sobre cómo funciona el UMAH Lumba Center en Bali, que es un ejemplo global sobre santuarios de delfines. Y si quieren ver esta presentación con subtítulos o traducida, pueden configurarlo aquí en los iconos de CC y el engranaje de YouTube. Muchas gracias a todos y buenas noches. Nos vemos el próximo jueves.
Adiós.